Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. So we're going to dive in because there's a lot of content to cover here in 25 minutes. And I think we're going to start broad today. How would you, team, describe the state of deep tech, ESG, and healthcare capital in Australia? And what do you see are the key challenges, particularly for Australia and APAC, but more broadly in terms of obtaining capital and commercialising great businesses?
Who wants to go first?
Oh, I didn't know that, sorry.
Perhaps I can just lead off by just sizing that discussion. So I'm not sure how many people know this, but Australia ranks as 7th in the OECD for research. So the amount of research that's coming out in deep tech, we're number 7. We rank number 30 in terms of innovation, so that's a big gap. But when it gets to economic complexity, we rank 105. So again, just so you understand the issue here, we produce a lot of research. We're kind of okay at commercialising it. We're really bad at actually doing very complex things. So I think there's a huge opportunity for Australia to actually match that amount of production of research with commercialisation and economic complexity.
Jeff, over to you.
Sure. So, look, just to follow on from that point, I touched on this in my talk yesterday, that if you look at VC funding per capita, we sit about 20 in the world. I mean, at $129 per person, we're way down the list. Singapore's at $800, the US is about $600 per person. A comparable country like Canada sits at about 180. So we sit about 20. So we just don't have the funding, at least VC funding, available to drive a lot of the research that is absolutely world class.
Yeah, look, and I'd just add to that, and honing in on Guy's point. And I should say that Skjander, unlike my colleagues here who are in venture capital, Skjander is an environmental credits trading fund, right? We're not working in the VC space. But that said, I have in previous roles worked around that area. Guy mentioned economic complexity. The number he's referencing there actually comes from the Harvard School of Economics Index of Economic Complexity. If anyone would like to go and look at the trends for Australia's economic complexity over the last 20-odd years, it is a very depressing story. We've essentially dropped about 35 places on that global ranking run by the Harvard Economic School. Over that period, we are now sitting, I think number 101 is actually Saudi Arabia, who are one step more complex as an economy than we are. However, the question actually was, how do we see things in our sector? Well, look, actually, oddly enough, in the sector of carbon markets, biodiversity markets, water markets, etc., which is where we play, Australia is actually, surprisingly, a world leader. We actually have very well-developed markets in this place. The global trends are very positive in that there have been UN agreements signed that are driving the creation of markets in those areas. But Australia is, at the moment, extremely well placed. So I'd like to hope we don't snatch defeat from the jaws of victory the way we have perhaps in the venture capital area.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to flip back to Guy. So Guy, given your depth here, how do you balance the need for patient capital with the pressure for venture-style returns and integrating these ESG considerations into the businesses that you invest in? We've got a broad spectrum of sort of environmental and governance risks and spinning out these companies into new frontier tech. How do you, as an investor, but also being deeply involved in each of these businesses, balance patient capital requirements with the financial returns and impact metrics?
Sure, thank you. So just so everyone understands, my firm, we partner with all the big Australian universities, so 9 of the largest Australian universities and CSIRO to commercialise their research. So we have a 24-person DD team looking at all the research coming out of the major universities to work out what should we fund, and once we're on the funding journey, then staying that course for a long time. Venture capital largely is a 10-year journey, and so there's no way around it. I mean, deep tech, biotech is a long-term game, and it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of money to be made. There is, but it's patient capital. I came from Macquarie Bank into this space, into venture capital, so I was fortunate enough to have some really good people around me who understood structuring. And so the way that I've dealt with that is that we raised our first fund back in 2018, recognising it was going to be a 2028 vintage by the time we got out. But along the way, we've had a great success with a lot of biotechs and deeptechs. So I raised a second fund to do what I call follow-on investing. And I think it's about structuring to make sure that you aren't forcing people to wait 10 years, because people don't want to wait 10 years to get a return. It's actually structuring it so that you can isolate what are the potential winners, put them into a separate structure and try and reduce that, if you like, the time frame to exit down to a more appropriate 4 to 5 year period. But it's hard.
Thank you. And I might flip over to Jeff now. Given your background on both the clinical and commercial side of healthcare, what do you look for when you're evaluating a medtech or biotech asset or business, when you're looking for commercial viability and success drivers?
It's a really broad question, because you have to look at so many metrics there to determine whether it's got a decent chance of clinical and commercial success. The first stage gate is really clinical. So we speak to specialists in that field and determine, is there a clinical need for a product like this? It might make sense on a piece of paper, but you've got to speak to the people who are using it in their hands, the specialists, and determine whether there is a clinical need and what else is out there. How does it compete with the incumbents in the market? Then when it comes to the commercial side, regulatory is huge in our game. It can be anywhere from a year, very best case scenario, if there are comparative products out there in the market. It can take 5 years, and in some cases 6 or 7 years to go through the regulatory process. And then you've got the individual country regulation. So there's Australia, which unfortunately we're really bad at regulating our own novel technologies. We're reliant on the CE system, and that's got more complex over the last, a lot more complex over the last few years. So in Australia, we used to be able to get products developed here to market very quickly in Australia. Mm-hmm. Because the European regulations have changed, we've got what's called a harmonisation agreement with the European Union, which means we are beholden to their standards. So now it takes, in many instances, really good Australian medical technologies where the clinical community is crying out for it. It takes years and years to get it to market here in our own backyard. So we look to the US, because they're actually more effective and more efficient in most cases now at getting these novel technologies to market. So from an investor point of view, we look at what the US market entry strategy is, and that's, in the first instance, regulatory, then it's reimbursement. Because if you then look at the US, it's a really complex reimbursement environment over there. They've got Medicare, Medicaid, a whole host of private insurers. So you've got to make sure that there's actually the necessary codes to ensure that this product is going to get funded once it gets to market. So that's kind of our first stage case. Then we have to obviously look at manufacturability, market fit, all these other elements. So we spend a lot of time in the due diligence phase making sure that all those boxes are ticked before we'll actually take any next steps with any new technologies that we're assessing.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. Over to Dr. Karel. So in our biodiversity space over here, can you talk a little bit more about your business and the role of Australia really being a leader in this particular space, and where you see the opportunities for carbon markets and where it's going?
Well, thank you, Carly. Yes, I can. I think in my days when I was a parliamentary staffer, that is known as a Dorothy Dixer. Very nice.
You're welcome.
Yes, so look, the nature of our business, like Guy, I'm a recovering Macquarie banker. I actually used to work in the energy sector there, so we've got some comments about energy coming up. But look, the biodiversity space, this is actually a fascinating area. It's some of the largest markets that no one has ever heard of. There's actually a market for biodiversity credits in New South Wales that's been running since 2016. It's a compliance market. Anyone who has ever done property development or land clearing of any sort will have found themselves in this scheme. Turns over $200 million a year. Its prices have gone up 15% per annum each year for the last 3 years. And most people who've not actually found themselves in the space have never heard of it. That was certainly my experience until I found myself doing a project that exposed me to it. So Our business, look, we're quite a simple business. We're a fund. We buy environmental instruments, primarily biodiversity credits, but also water and carbon. We hold them, we sell them. It's actually a very simple business. Why are we doing that? There's a global framework that's been put in place in the last couple of years to drive markets in this area, in biodiversity. Bloomberg has estimated that global turnover in those markets is going to hit $160 billion a year, US dollars a year, by 2030. So it's a very rapidly growing alternative asset class. We find rapidly growing alternative asset classes to be an exciting place to work. So that's, I guess, in terms of the fundamentals in this space, we actually see an area that's growing extremely quickly, that's got some very large, both global, national and state level regulatory drivers to drive that growth. And we're excited about the space in part because it's completely uncorrelated to anything else.
Fantastic. I'm going to take a different slant now and head to my hot topic, AI. You'd comment a little bit about the pace and depth at which AI is really taking over parts of your industry, and how are you seeing that play out, particularly given each of the industries we're talking about, Deeptech, healthcare, and ESG, all have quite complex privacy, reporting, governance, risk elements to it. How are you seeing AI play out in your markets?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to lead here. On the biotech side, I was on a forum last week in Dubai, a global forum, where a lot of the commentary was around there's going to be a huge revolution in the speed of getting drugs to market. And there was this, I think, a misunderstood concept about the whole process. I think AI will have a really critical role in improving the efficiency and effectiveness of discoveries. But you have to understand that particularly with typical biotech, there are phased trials that involve human beings. And you can't shorten that pathway. You have to go through phase 1 for safety. You have to go through phase 2 for efficacy. You have to do a big phase 3 trial if you actually want to put it across a bigger platform. So you can't shorten those timeframes. What you can do is improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the process along the way with AI. On the deep tech side, so particularly we've done a lot in ag tech, we're seeing huge inroads occur in ag tech through the use of AI, because you're largely capturing a lot of data, and the ability to interrogate and then try and make some assessment about the future of what's going to happen to disease in crops is a classic one. AI can come in and play a role that up until now human beings have not been able to do, because we just can't process that amount of data. So I see it as being sort of a two-stage process. I think on biotech, it'll improve effectiveness and efficiency of the process. On ag tech, I think it'll be revolutionary.
Thank you.
You look in biotech and medtech, AI is going to be transformative. And as Guy touched on there, in biotech, it's really to do with development and discovery and also management of those clinical trials. It's quite different in medtech. And medtech, for those who aren't familiar with it, we largely define it as gadgets or widgets, medical devices, tangible bits of hardware. So everything from hip and knee implants, pacemakers, defibrillators, through to large, linear accelerators for treating cancer. So data capture there is where AI is going to play a huge role, because increasingly all of these bits of hardware are going to capture data from the patient, analyse that data, which will allow them to either perform more effectively or efficiently, or to change the treatment paradigms for those patients. So, for example, one of the technologies that will be in our portfolio is an ACL tensioning device. So at the moment, if you rupture your ACL ligament, the surgeon just intuitively by feel, once he puts your new ligament in there, he pulls on the new ligament, says that feels about right, cycles the knee, and then screws it in place. This is a tensioning device where you wrap the new ligament around there, you apply a very precise amount of tension to it, and it captures that data. It electronically sends the data from that device to the surgeon's smartphone. So you build up this huge database over time of what tension for what patient works best. So a 22-year-old elite athlete requires a different level of ligament tensioning to a 45-year-old largely sedentary person who might have just fallen over in the shower. But we don't know that at the moment. And so that's where AI in the background will be able to analyse all this data and optimise, in this case, the amount of tension that you put on an ACL ligament. And that holds true for any number of technologies in MedTech. So I think it will be transformative.
And I imagine that given that the logic attached to AI is really dependent on the questions we ask it. So having a diverse set of people at the table to be able to understand the uniqueness of all of the communities that we serve and the way that affects health, that a way that affects the way the body moves, the way that each of these injuries play out in the individual's body. Having people at the table to ask those smart questions so that logic doesn't become bedded in an AI model that doesn't serve everyone. This is a real opportunity for us to set that agenda. Over to you, Dr. Karel.
Well, the short answer is it's transformative. Absolutely, it is. Look, data in the whole sector is a booming area. Again, it's slightly out of sector for me, but one of the interesting developments that we're seeing out there is the rollout of a thing called the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. This is a global consortium, mostly of banks and big corporates, that have agreed a standard framework for collecting data about environmental and other similar related risks, and then how to report those in the context of their portfolio management. The example I give is, for those of you who are old enough to remember the BHP Octedi disaster. BHP had invested into a copper mine in Papua New Guinea. It was going to be the deal of a lifetime. It did indeed prove to be the deal of a lifetime, but not the way they expected. It involved cyanide-laden wastewater running into creeks and all manner of expenses. If you are an investor, how do you know if those sorts of environmental risks are actually in your portfolio? And the answer in the past has been, we didn't. But courtesy of things like that TNFD framework, that data is now being collected. And then the question arises, how do you process that data and turn it into actionable decisions? And the answer largely is AI. We're certainly using it in our business extensively for looking at the data sets that we're collecting about what sorts of developments are occurring in New South Wales and what sort of land clearing does that imply, and hence what sorts of investments should we be making. So yes, that was the long version of the answer. I'll come back to the short version. Transformational.
Amazing. Thank you. So I'd like to use our last 7 minutes to run a bit of a lightning round. So if I could start back with you, Guy, one prediction and one warning for the road ahead.
Sure. Well, the prediction, I think, is those who followed the chaos that is the US research at the moment, that's the opportunity. I think Australia stands a chance to really benefit from the fact that we have strong research skills. We've got a stable governance environment, and I think we will be able to attract a lot of those really talented researchers out of the US market, and we should be doing it. So I think that's one. I think one of the risks that people haven't yet factored into portfolio is quantum. And there's a lot of talk about AI and conventional computing and supercomputing. I don't think people are actually spending enough time to really understand quantum. Quantum will arrive. It's a question about when does quantum arrive. And when quantum arrives, it will be, you talk about the word transformational, but it will transform a lot of things. You can go to energy. I mean, quantum is far more energy efficient than supercomputing. There's a lot of investment going in data centers. So I think there's a disruption that will occur when quantum comes in that nobody's quite prepared for yet.
When it comes to the data capture side of things, something as simple as a hip or knee replacement, which has been largely a dumb device to date, has been a bit of hardware that sits in there, and it does its job, but doesn't actually capture any data. All of those implants will soon be embedded with sensors that will have an AI component in them. And in fact, it's already happening across the board. So the opportunity there is to, frankly, just get better health outcomes, because we're going to know more about, one, how the implants are working, and two, how our bodies respond to those implants. The risk here, I hope there are no radiologists in the room, because I would not want to be a clinical specialist like a radiologist at the moment, because AI is doing their job better than they've ever been able to do. We already see it with Australian developed technologies like Harrison AI and ProMedicus, and there's a whole host of them overseas where they will replace the need for clinicians. And that's going to save money, but there's still an element of wanting to speak to a human being often. And so I think it's going to depersonalise medicine to a large extent. And people won't have that face-to-face and that personal interaction they currently do with their doctors. And I think that's going to be a loss to society.
Okay, so the prediction?
Yes.
Okay, so the prediction?
One prediction, one warning.
One prediction, one warning. Okay, one hope was the question
okay.
that you'd asked in the briefing. Okay, so the prediction is continued explosive growth in environmental markets, and I say that because Australia, along with many other countries, has ratified some UN agreements that set some extremely aggressive targets. Just one is a thing called the 30 by 30 by 30 target. So many countries have agreed, including Australia, to put 30% of their land and 30% of their sea under protection by 2030. What does that mean? It's about a tripling of the national parks estate in the next 5 years. Okay, it's a very aggressive target. As governments realise the scale of money that will be required, we're expecting to see a very large growth in environmental markets generally. So there's my prediction. Where's the warning? I anticipate a fair bit of pushback from areas of the community as they see what that's implying. One of the implications of that is that some fraction of Australia's farmland is going to be taken out of farming and turned into parks. That will not be popular in every corner of the community. So what's my warning? I'm expecting to see a certain amount of political heat and light about the environmental targets we've set and how we're proposing to meet them. And my hope is that governments, which have had a historically poor track record of implementing policies to actually attract investment into given sectors, and certainly we've seen that in the venture capital space. There's many counterproductive regulations in that space. Certainly in the environmental market space, we've seen plenty of counterproductive rules and regulations that don't actually attract investment. So what's my hope? My hope is that governments will wake up and see the many opportunities to attract investment from well-ordered, well-run environmental markets.
Fantastic. And I might add mine too. I think on the prediction side, we've got huge demands for energy, and picking up on our ESG angle here, I think I was on the front foot of that, sitting alongside the AWS guys at Amazon, and obviously we have huge energy demands, both on the data center side, but also Gen AI, and that's only going to accelerate. So I think I'm really excited about science coming out around fusion and many other different technologies that I think will transform how we look at renewables and transition from traditional energy. My warning really, I think, is about the future of work and the way that we train people, the way that we deliver services. Picking up on your point around human-centered care, I think many of the skills that have traditionally been, in some ways, women's skills, the ability to show empathy and connect with people and ideas, I think that's going to become increasingly more important. I think the other piece is around cross-functional skills. The more access we have to expertise and data across industries, we're going to need less of functional experts working in silos and more people thinking laterally and cross-functionally across issues to solve really complex things, both on the architecture side, the way that we ask questions, the way that we structure all of the information that's running through an algorithm, and also the way that we deliver those answers, the way we question, the way we critically think. So I think this is a really challenging but opportune time for education, but also the way we train our teams and the way that we deliver services to our clients. Well, I want to thank the panelists for making the time today. It's been fascinating getting to know each of you, and each of them are in such very interesting spaces. So I encourage everyone to grab some time with them and ask them about their businesses, because you won't be disappointed.